This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. Welcome to this deep dive, and today we're going to be tackling a phrase I'm sure you heard everywhere: authentic leadership.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the typical surface level stuff.
Right.
We're going to be going beyond those buzzwords and really uncovering what authentic leadership really means.
Mm-hmm.
And lucky for us, we have about 20 years of research to help us do that.
That's right.
And guess what? We're going to be using this new understanding to analyze some of the biggest names, figures of our time.
Yes.
Putin, Trump, and Musk.
It's really interesting because this research completely flips the script on what we thought we knew about authentic leadership.
Okay.
It's not just about personality or charisma.
Right.
It's about sending these specific signals that reveal a leader's true values.
So it's not about just saying all the right things, but it's their actions and how those actions show their true colors.
Exactly. It's like a code, a system of signals that they send through their words, their decisions, even their body language. And these signals, they actually impact how people react to them, how they follow them.
Oh, wow.
Even if those followers don't realize what's happening.
That's fascinating. So what are these signals we should be looking for?
Yeah.
Because let's be real, understanding this could be a superpower in today's world, right?
Absolutely. Researchers have identified 4 key signals.
Okay.
Self-awareness, internal moral perspective, balanced processing, and relational transparency.
Those are big words.
Yeah.
So before we jump into examples of those,
Okay.
can you break down those signals a little bit more?
Sure.
Starting with self-awareness.
Yeah.
What does that even look like in a leader?
So think of a leader who's constantly seeking feedback, whether it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to look at themselves honestly and admit when they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They own their weaknesses and actively try to learn and grow.
Okay.
Now think about how different that is from a leader who never admits mistakes and surrounds themselves with yes people.
Oh.
What kind of impact would that have on their decisions, their team, even their entire organization?
I can already think of a few bosses I've had in the past who weren't the best at taking feedback.
No.
Some were definitely better than others.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the second signal.
Okay.
What about internal moral perspective?
This is about a leader's ethical compass.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about talking about values.
Yeah.
It's about their decisions actually being rooted in those values.
Right.
And that's even when they're facing tough choices or public pressure. These leaders encourage open discussions about ethics,
Okay.
even when it's uncomfortable. And they lead by example.
So actions actually matching their words.
Exactly. Take someone like Elon Musk.
Okay.
He talks about innovation and pushing boundaries, but some of his actions send a different message,
Okay.
like demanding that employees justify their jobs
Right.
without much room for discussing the ethical implications,
Yeah.
or making controversial statements that cause protests and division.
Yeah, seen that.
So it raises questions about whether his internal moral compass is truly guiding his decisions, or if it's something else.
That's so interesting how once you kind of know what to look for, you can start seeing these mismatched signals everywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's go on to balanced processing.
Yeah.
What is that?
Think of it this way. Does the leader only see things their way, or do they actively seek out different viewpoints before making a decision?
Okay.
Balanced processing means recognizing your own biases, weighing different options,
Okay.
and using tools to make sure that everyone's voice is heard.
Right.
So whether it's brainstorming, getting feedback from various teams, or even using anonymous surveys, it's about making sure decisions aren't made in a vacuum.
So it's someone who genuinely wants to make the best choice, not just push their own agenda.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with someone like Putin, who often rules by decree.
Right.
He makes unilateral decisions, bypassing any real checks and balances.
Yeah.
And this lack of balanced processing has led to international condemnation and even conflict.
Wow.
So it shows how ignoring different perspectives can have massive consequences, not just in business, but on a global scale.
Makes you realize how critical this is,
Yeah.
not just for business decisions, but for, global stability.
Right.
All right, last but not least, tell us about relational transparency.
This is about being real. being human.
Okay.
It's about building trust by being open and honest about your limitations, your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Even admitting when you don't have all the answers.
Right.
It's that leader who can say, I messed up and here's what I learned. This vulnerability allows them to connect with their team on a deeper level.
Okay.
And that fosters genuine trust.
So it's not about pretending to be perfect, but about being relatable.
Exactly. And this brings us to Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay.
He publicly emphasized his foundation's commitment to diversity and inclusion, assuring employees this was a priority. But then, just weeks later, he completely dismantled the initiative.
That's a classic example of actions not matching words.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the authenticity of those initial statements.
Right.
What message does that send to the employees who actually believed him?
It erodes trust and raises questions about whether he truly embodies this relational transparency. This kind of inconsistency can be incredibly damaging to a leader's credibility.
Right.
And it brings us to a crucial point. You can't fake authentic leadership.
Okay.
It's not just about saying the right thing.
Yeah.
It's about deeply aligning your actions with your values.
This has been so eye-opening already. I'm already rethinking how I view all these leaders that I encounter.
Yeah.
Not even just the famous ones.
And that's exactly what's so valuable about this new understanding.
Okay.
It gives you a framework for seeing leadership in a completely different light.
Okay.
And trust me, once you start noticing these signals, you can't unsee them.
Yeah, it's true. Wow. It's like you've given us this secret decoder ring for leadership.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm already starting to notice these signals everywhere.
Yeah.
But here's a thought.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all these high profile leaders.
Right.
How does this apply to everyday life?
Yeah.
Leaders that we encounter at our jobs, in our communities, even in our own families.
That's what makes this framework so powerful. It really is applicable across the board.
Okay.
So think about your own boss.
Okay.
Do they embody these signals? Do they seek out diverse opinions?
Mm-hmm.
Are they transparent about their decisions and the reasoning behind them?
Okay.
Or do they operate in a more top-down, closed-off way?
Wow, I'm already analyzing my manager in my head.
Right.
But let's get real for a second.
Okay.
Isn't there a little bit of a gray area here?
Yeah.
Isn't there a difference between consciously faking these signals to manipulate people versus a leader who's maybe still developing these skills?
That's a great point. There's definitely a difference between someone who's genuinely striving to be more authentic and someone who's intentionally using these signals as a form of manipulation. And that's where observation becomes key.
So what should we be looking for to determine someone's true intentions?
I think consistency is key.
Okay.
Are their actions consistently aligned with their words over time? Or do you see a pattern of contradictions?
Okay.
So, for example, a leader might talk a big game about valuing employee feedback, but if they consistently shut down dissenting opinions or only reward yes people, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Their actions are betraying their words.
It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly.
You can talk about being a certain type of leader.
Right.
But ultimately, it's your behavior that's going to reveal the truth?
Absolutely. And paying attention to these inconsistencies can be incredibly insightful.
Okay.
Not just in the workplace, but in all areas of life. Think about political leaders.
Okay.
Do their policies and decisions actually reflect the values they claim to uphold?
Right.
Or are there gaps between their rhetoric and reality?
This is making me rethink how I evaluate leaders, period.
Yeah.
It's not just about their charisma or what they say, giving speeches and things.
Right.
It's about looking deeper, observing their actions, and seeing if those actions are matching up with their words over time.
Absolutely. And that awareness is so crucial because it allows you to make more informed choices.
Okay.
About who you choose to follow, who you choose to support,
right,
or even work for.
Makes sense.
Once you understand this framework, you can't unsee it.
It's like having a superpower. It's like you can cut through all the noise and really see people for who they really are.
Right.
But something else comes to mind.
What's that?
We live in a world where image is everything.
Yeah.
Social media, personal branding, it's all about presentation.
Uh-huh.
So how do we reconcile that with this idea of authentic leadership?
That's a good question.
Isn't there an element of performance involved in leadership?
Yeah.
Especially in today's world?
That's a really insightful question.
Okay.
And you're right. There's this delicate balance between presenting yourself effectively and being authentic.
Okay.
And I think the key difference lies in the intention.
Okay.
Are you crafting your image just to manipulate or deceive?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you simply trying to communicate your genuine values and vision
Yeah.
in a way that resonates with others?
So it's not about shying away from presentation altogether.
Right.
But it's about making sure that that presentation is rooted in authenticity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Authentic leadership isn't about being perfect or fitting into some predefined mold.
Okay.
It's about being true to yourself,
Yeah.
being true to your values,
Mm-hmm.
and letting that guide your actions and your communication.
Okay.
And yes, that might involve some level of like performance
Yeah.
in terms of how you present yourself.
Right.
But the foundation should always be genuine.
You know, this whole conversation has been so eye-opening.
Sure.
I feel like I have this like whole new lens for viewing leadership. Mm-hmm. And it's a little intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, if authentic leadership is about this deep alignment between our values and our actions, like, where do you even begin?
It can feel a little overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
But remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
And the first step is simply becoming aware of those signals, which you've already started doing.
Okay, so what comes next?
Yeah.
Like, let's say someone's listening to this right now.
Okay.
And they're feeling inspired to be a more authentic leader.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
I would say start with self-reflection.
Okay.
Take some time to really, dig deep. Ask yourself, what are my core values? What do I truly believe in?
Okay.
What kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of legacy do I want to leave behind?
So it's like laying the foundation, like getting clear on your personal why.
Exactly. And once you have that foundation,
Okay.
the next step is to look at your actions.
Okay.
Are you walking the walk or are you just talking the talk? Are your decisions actually aligned with those core values that you identified?
Right.
Are you being honest with yourself?
Yeah.
About your strengths and your weaknesses?
Okay.
This is where those 4 signals come into play as those guideposts.
So it's like this constant process of checking in with yourself and making sure that your actions reflect your values.
Precisely. And it's not about being perfect. None of us are.
Right.
It's about being intentional.
Okay.
It's about recognizing when you fall short.
Yeah.
And having the courage to kind of course correct.
It sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is it worth it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The impact of authentic leadership is undeniable.
Okay.
It builds trust, it inspires loyalty, creates a culture where people feel safe to be themselves and contribute their best work.
Okay.
And that translates into better results, stronger relationships, and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
Okay.
Not just for the leader, but for everyone that they touch.
So it's not just about like personal gain. It's about creating this positive ripple effect.
Exactly. Authentic leadership isn't about power or control.
Okay.
It's about empowering others, creating a positive impact that extends far beyond yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
Empowering others. I think that's such a more inspiring way to think about leadership.
Yeah.
So if we could leave our listeners with one final thought, what would it be?
Remember this. You don't need a fancy title or a position to be a leader.
Okay.
Leadership is a choice. It's a way of being in the world. We all have the capacity to lead, to influence, to inspire.
Okay.
Start by embodying those 4 signals in your own life, at work, in your relationships, in your community. You'll be amazed by the difference it makes.
That is a powerful message.
Yeah.
I think we can all be authentic leaders in our own way.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
On this deep dive into authentic leadership.
It's been my pleasure.
It's really been eye-opening for me.
Good.
I know I'll never look at leadership the same way again.
I'm glad to hear that.
And to our listeners, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Keep those signals in mind, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.
Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other podcasts, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.